Hello, Squirrel Squad listeners. Let's get back to our book. Hopefully we'll get finished with this thing. Let's see. The scene rapidly brightened into light and color as the blaze sprang up, showing the little kettle slung gypsy-wise on forked sticks, and the supper prettily set forth in a leafy table service on a smooth, flat stone. I read this before, but I'm going back over this. Soon 4 pairs of wet feet surrounded the fire, an agreeable oblivion of mewum and tuum concerning plates, knives, and cups did away with etiquette, and everyone was in a comfortable state of weariness, which rendered the thought of bed so pleasant that they deferred their enjoyment of the reality as children kept the best bite till the last. "What are you thinking of here all by yourself?" asked Mark, coming to lounge on his sister's plaid, which she had spread somewhat apart from the others, and where she sat watching the group before her with a dreamy aspect. "I was watching your 2 friends. See what a fine study they make with the red flicker of the fire on their faces and the background of dark pines behind them." They did make a fine study, for both were goodly men, yet utterly unlike, one being the heroic type, the other of the poetic. Warwick was a head taller than his tall friend, broad-shouldered, strong-limbed, and bronzed by wind and weather. A massive head covered with rings of ruddy brown hair, gray eyes that seemed to pierce through all disguises, an eminent nose, and a beard like one of Mark's stout saints. Power, intellect, and courage were stamped on face and figure, making him the manliest man that Sylvia had ever seen. He leaned against the stone, yet nothing could have been less reposeful than his attitude, for the native unrest of the man asserted itself in spite of weariness or any soothing influence of time or place. Moore was much slighter and betrayed in every gesture the unconscious grace of the gentleman born. A most attractive face, with its broad brow, serene eyes, and the cordial smile about the mouth. A sweet, strong nature, one would say, which having used life well, had learned the secret of a true success. Inward tranquility seemed his, and it was plain to see that no wave of sound, no wandering breath, no glimpses of color, no hint of night or nature was without its charm and its significance for him. "Tell me about that man, Mark. I've heard you speak of him since you came home, but supposing he was some blowsy artist, I never cared to ask about him. Now I've seen him, I want to know more," said Sylvia, as her brother laid himself down after an approving glance at the group opposite. "I met him in Munich when I first went abroad, and since then we have often come upon each other in our wanderings. He never writes, but goes and comes intent upon his own affairs, yet one can never forget him, and is always glad to feel the grip of his hand again. It seems to put such life and courage into one." "Is he good?" asked Sylvia, woman-like, beginning with the morals. Violently virtuous. He is a masterful soul, bent on living out his beliefs and aspirations at any cost. Much given to denunciations of wrongdoing everywhere, and eager to execute justice upon all offenders, high or low. Yet he possesses great nobility of character, great audacity of mind, and leads a life of the sternest integrity. "Is he rich?" in his own eyes because he makes his wants so few. Is he married? No, he has no family and not many friends, for he says what he means in the bluntest English, and few few stand the test his sincerity applies. What does he do in the world? I'm sure I did. Yeah. Studies it as we do books, dives into everything, analyzes character, and builds up his own with materials which will last. If that's not genius, it's something better. Then he will do much goodwill and be famous, won't he? Great good to many, but never will be famous, I fear. He's too fierce and iconoclast to suit the old party, too individual a reformer to join the new, and being born a century too soon, must bide his time or lay out his art before and play out his part before stage and audience are ready for him. Is he learned? Very, and uncommon sorts of wisdom. Left college after a year of it because he could not give him what he wanted, and taking the world for his university, life for his tutors, says he shall not graduate till his term ends with days. I know I shall like him very much. I hope so. For my sake. He is a grand man in the rough, and excellent tonic for those who have courage to try him. Sylvia was silent, thinking over all she had just heard and finding much to interest her in it, because to her imaginative and enthusiastic nature there was something irresistibly attractive in the strong solidarity, self-reliant man. Mark watched her for a moment, then asked with lazy curiosity, "How do you like this other friend of mine? He went away when I was such a child that since he came back I've had to begin again, but if I like him at the end of another month as much as I do now, I shall try to make your friend my friend, because I need such a one very much." Mark laughed at the innocent frankness of his sister's speech, but took it as she meant it, and answered soberly, eyes are closing up. It's hard to see when the lines go together. Soberly, better leave platonics till you're 40, though Moore is 12 years older than yourself. He is a young man still, and you are grown a very captivating little woman. Sylvia looked both scornful and indignant. You need have no fears. There is such a thing as true and simple friendship between men and women, and if you can find any of my own sex who can give me the help and happiness I want, why may I not look for it anywhere and accept it with whatever shape it comes? You may, my dear, and I'll lend a hand with all my heart, but you must be willing to take the consequences in whatever shape they come, said Mark, not ill pleased with the prospect his fancy conjured up. I will, replied Sylvia loftily, and fate took her at her word. Presently someone suggested bed, and the proposition was unanimously accepted. I would be accepting it. Where are you going to hang me? Asked Sylvia as she laid hold of her hammock and looked about her with nearly as much interest as if her suspicions was to be of the perpendicular sort. You're not to be swung up in a tree tonight, but laid like a ghost, and requested not to walk till morning. There's an unused barn close by, so we shall have a roof over us for one night longer, answered Mark, playing Chamberlain, while the others remained to quench the fire and secure the larder. An early moon lighted Sylvia to bed, and when shown her half the barn, which, as she was a Marine, was very properly the bay, Mark explained, she scouted the idea of being nervous or timid in such rude quarters, made herself a cozy nest, and bade her brother a merry good night. More weary than she would confess, Sylvia fell asleep at once. Despite the novelty of her situation and the noises that filled a summer night with fitful rustlings and tones. How long she slept she did not know, but woke suddenly and sat erect with that curious thrill which sometimes startles one out of the deepest slumber, and is often the forerunner of some dread or danger. She felt this hot tingle through blood and nerves, and stared about her, thinking of fire. But everything was dark and still, and after waiting a few moments, she decided that her nest had been too warm, for her temples throbbed and her cheeks were feverish with the close air of the barn half filled with new-made hay. Creeping up a fragrant slope, she spread her plaid again and lay down where a cool breath flowed through wide chinks in the wall. Sleep was slowly returning when the rustle of footsteps scared it away and set her heart beating fast, for they came toward the new couch she had chosen. Holding her breath she listened. The quiet tread grew nearer and nearer till it paused within a yard of her. Then someone needed to throw themselves down, sigh heavily a few times, and grow still as if falling asleep. "It's Mark," thought Sylvia, and whispered his name, but no answer came. And from the other corner of the barn she heard her brother muttering in his sleep. Who was it then? Mark had said there was no cattle. It's crazy. Were no cattle near. She was sure neither of her comrades had left their you look that one up. Oh, come on. Work with me here. Okay. Bivouac. A temporary camp without tents or covers, used especially by soldiers or mountaineers. Bivouac, maybe. Anyway, for there was her brother talking as usual in his dreams. Someone seemed restless and turned often with decided motion. That was Warwick, she thought, while the quietest sleeper of the three betrayed his presence by laughing once with a low-toned merriment she recognized as Moore's. These discoveries left her a prey to visions of grimy strollers, maudlin farm servants, and infectious immigrants. Immigrants in dismal array. A strong desire to cry out possessed her for a moment, but was checked, for all was sensitiveness. Sylvia had much common sense, and that spirit which hates to be conquered, even by a natural fear. She remembered her scornful repudiation. God almighty. Sorry. Of the charge of timidity and the endless jokes she would have to undergo if her mysterious neighbor should prove some harmless wanderer or an imaginary terror of her own. As she held her peace, thinking valiantly as the drops gathered on her forehead and every sense grew painfully alert. I'll not call if my hair turns gray with fright and I find myself an idiot tomorrow, I told them to try me, and I won't be found wanting at the first alarm. I'll be still if anything does not touch me till dawn, when I shall know how to act at once, and so save myself from ridicule at the cost of a wakeful night. Holding fast to this resolve, Sylvia lay motionless, listening to the crickets chirp without and taking uncomfortable notes of the state of things within, for the new corner stirred heavily, sighed long and deeply, and seemed to wake often, like one too sad or weary to rest. She would have been wise to have screamed her scream and had the rout over, for the most tormented herself. Been doing this wrong. Tormented herself with the integrity of a lively fancy, and studied more from her own terrors, and at the discovery of a dozen vampires. Every tale of diablerie she had ever heard came most inopportunely to haunt her now, and though she felt their folly, she could not free herself from their dominion. She wondered till she could wonder no longer what the morning would show her. She tried to calculate in how many springs she could reach and fly over. The low partition which separated her from her sleeping bodyguard. She wished with all her heart that she had stayed in her nest, which was lower than the door, and watched for dawn with eyes that ached to see the light. In the midst of these distressful sensations, the far-off crow of some vigilant chanticleer assured her that the short summer night was wearing away and relief was at hand. This comfortable conviction had so good an effect that she lapsed into what had seemed perversion. Making up words. Where was I? His comfortable convictions had so good an effect that she lapsed into what seemed a moment's oblivion, but was in fact an hour's restless sleep. For when her eyes unclosed again, the first red streaks were visible in the east, and a dim light found its way into the barn through the guest door, which had been left ajar for air. An instant Sylvia lay collecting herself, then rose on her. Wait a minute. Found its way into the barn through a great door which had been left ajar for the air. An instant Sylvia had been collecting herself. Collecting herself, then rose on her arm, looked resolutely behind her, stared with round eyes a moment, and dropped down again, laughing with a merriment which, coming on the heels of her long alarm, was rather hysterical. All she saw was a little soft-eyed Alderney, which lifted its stag-like head and regarded her with a confidence aspect that won her pardon for its innocent offense. Through the relief of both hand and mind and body, which she experienced in no small degree, the first thought that came was a thankful Ola joke. Oh my God, I get Ola Joe in here. I must just fell asleep and dreaming about Ola Joe. Ola Joe! I'd stop this at the last page. I hope this makes sense. Oh my gosh. I don't even know. Through the relief of both mind and body, which she experienced in no small degree. The first thought that came was a thankful, what a mercy I didn't call Mark, for I should never have heard the last of this. And having fought her fears alone, she enjoyed her success alone, and girl-like resolved to say nothing of her first night's adventures. Collecting herself up, she crept nearer and caressed her late terror, which stretched its neck toward her with a comfortable sound, and munched her shawl like a cosset lamb. But before this new friendship was many minutes old, Sylvia's heavy lids fell together, her head dropped lower and lower, her hands lay still on the dappled neck, and with a long sigh of weariness, she dropped back upon the hay, leaving little Alderney to watch over her much more tranquilly than she had watched over it. Thank you, Jesus. Okay, that's it for chapter 3. Oh, that's so funny. Chapter 4 is called Through Flood and Field and Fire. And I will try to read earlier in the day. I keep saying that. Then the day gets away. Coughing dumb. I love y'all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. I'm going to go in here for a little bit. Love ya. Bye.